Spinal cord anatomy. In this lecture, I will discuss the gross and sectional anatomy of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a cylindrical cord that extends inferiorly from the medulla oblongata of the brain through the vertebral canal. That is, the canal that is formed by the vertebral foramina, the holes or openings in the vertebral bones, the vertebrae. The image at the bottom left shows a single vertebra and the vertebral foramen is labeled. The middle image shows the anatomical alignment of two adjacent vertebrae with the spinal cord filling the vertebral foramina, which form the vertebral canal. The spinal cord ends at L1, that is, the first lumbar vertebra, with the conus medullaris, the tapered end of the spinal cord. The conus medullaris is highlighted in orange in the image on the right. There are two widened areas in the spinal cord, one near the neck, called the cervical enlargement, and one near the end of the cord, called the lumbar enlargement. These areas are shown in the image. The spinal cord is subdivided into 5 parts. The topmost is the cervical part, which contains 8 pairs of cervical spinal nerves. This is followed by the thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal parts. Note that the parts of the spinal cord do not match up exactly with the vertebrae of the same name. The lumbar part of the spinal cord is actually closer to T12 than L1, and the sacral and coccygeal parts are nearest to L1, which is where the spinal cord ends. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. The nerves pass through the intervertebral foramina as they leave the spinal cord. Because the spinal cord ends at L1, the spinal nerves lumbar 2 through lumbar 5, sacral 1 through sacral 5, and coccygeal 1 extend inferiorly from the conus medullaris, forming the cauda equina. Because the appearance of these nerves resemble a horse's tail, they were named the cauda equina of the spinal cord. Cauda means tail, and equina means horse. Within the cauda equina is the filum terminale. The filum terminale is a thin strand of pia mater that helps anchor the conus medullaris to the coccyx. The cauda equina and the filum terminale are shown in the image. The spinal nerves are named and numbered by where they exit the vertebral column. Do you remember how many cervical vertebrae there are? That's right, 7. Yet there are 8 cervical nerves. C1 exits above the C1 vertebra. The last spinal nerve is coccygeal 1. Press pause and make your brain work to answer the questions. The spinal cord is protected and encapsulated by spinal cord meninges, which are continuous with the cranial meninges. The pia mater is composed of elastic and collagen fibers and adheres to the spinal cord. It forms the filum terminale. The arachnoid mater is a web-like layer below which is the subarachnoid space, which is where the cerebrospinal fluid flows. The cerebrospinal fluid flows down through the central canal of the spinal cord and up via the subarachnoid space back into the brain and then is absorbed into the bloodstream. The dura mater is the tough outermost layer composed of dense irregular connective tissue. The subdural space is a potential space below the dura and above the arachnoid mater. The epidural space is above the dura, between the dura and the vertebral bones. The epidural space contains adipose and areolar connective tissue and blood vessels. Anesthetics are placed into the epidural space to lessen pain during childbirth. In a lumbar puncture, also called a spinal tap, cerebrospinal fluid is obtained from the subarachnoid space between the lower lumbar vertebrae. These spaces and layers are shown in the image. Gray matter in the spinal cord consists of neuron cell bodies, dendrites, unmyelinated axons, and glial cells. In the spinal cord, outer white matter surrounds the inner gray matter, which is different from the brain. The projections of gray matter are named horns. The anterior horns house cell bodies of somatic neurons. The lateral horns are composed of cell bodies of the autonomic motor neurons, and the posterior horns are made of axons of sensory neurons and cell bodies of interneurons. The gray commissure is a horizontal band of gray matter that surrounds the central canal. It contains unmyelinated axons that connect the left and right gray matter. The gray matter is highlighted in orange in the image, and the gray commissure is labeled. This image shows the location of white and gray matter in the spinal cord, including the gray commissure. The gray matter includes the anterior, lateral, and posterior horns and the gray commissure. The gray matter in the spinal cord also contains nuclei, that is, groups of cell bodies. The sensory nuclei are located in the posterior horn and contain interneuron cell bodies. The somatic sensory nuclei receive signals from the soma, that is, the skin, muscles, and joints. The visceral sensory nuclei receive signals from the viscera and blood vessels. Viscera are the internal organs of the body. Motor nuclei are located in the anterior and lateral horns and contain motor neurons. The somatic motor nuclei innervate skeletal muscle, and the autonomic motor nuclei innervate smooth muscle, heart, and glands. The image shows the location of the sensory and motor nuclei in the horns. It also shows the incoming afferent sensory neurons in the posterior or dorsal root and the outgoing efferent motor axons in the anterior or ventral root of the spinal nerve. The white matter is outermost and surrounds the gray matter in the spinal cord. The white matter consists primarily of myelinated axons traveling to and from the brain. The regions are named funiculi and contain axon bundles called fasciculi. The funiculi contain both ascending, which is sensory, and descending, which is motor, tracts, except the posterior funiculi only carry sensory tracts. The left and right anterior funiculi are connected by the white commissure. The white matter is highlighted in orange in the image.